She agreed to marry a stranger in less than 4 hours and discovered too late that the rancher was hiding a secret so devastating it explained every desperate word he had spoken that night. Can you imagine the courage it takes to accept the hand of a man whose surname you don't even know, to wear a borrowed dress stained with wine, and to promise before God something your heart doesn't yet feel? But this story happened in the rugged plains of Wyoming in August of 1889, when the desperation of a woman met the desperation of a man, and from that meeting was born something neither of them expected. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Write your city and state or country. I love knowing that these stories reach people in so many different places, and who knows, maybe you'll find someone from your own town right here in the comments. Let's go, join in. Helen Vance was 28 years old and carried on her shoulders the weight of someone who learned too early that the world has no pity for a poor widow. It had been 3 years since she buried her husband, a good man named Thomas, who died crushed when the wagon he was repairing collapsed on top of him. They had no children. Perhaps it was a blessing, Helen thought on the bad nights, because raising a child alone would be even harder than surviving alone. She was left with a brass wedding band, 2 iron skillets, and debts that consumed even the skillets. Without family, without land, without the protection of an important name, Helen did what women like her did. She learned to sew better, wash clothes faster, lower her head at the right time, and never ever give reason for wagging tongues. For the last 2 years, she worked at the Acacia boarding house, a 3-story building in the center of Hope's Crossing, a small town surviving on cattle trade and dry goods. The owner, Constance Fitzroy, was a widow too, but a wealthy one, the kind who wore mourning like a trophy and used Christian as an insult. Helen slept in a windowless cupboard at the back, next to the kitchen that heated the room like an oven in the summer. She woke before the sun rose to brew coffee, wash sheets, serve guests, mend tears, and sweep the parlor. In exchange, she received a roof, leftover food, and $3 a month, always paid 2 weeks late, with the look of someone bestowing charity. Constance had a daughter, Eula, a girl of 22, pretty as a porcelain doll, but poisonous as a rattlesnake. Eula didn't work. She merely circulated through the boarding house in lace dresses her mother bought in Cheyenne, waiting for some rich cattleman or widower merchant to propose. But the men looked, complimented, and left without proposing. Constance blamed the lack of a larger dowry. Eula blamed Helen. The girl was sickeningly jealous of any woman the guests looked at for more than 3 seconds. And Helen, even in a worn dress with her hair always pulled back in a tight bun, had the kind of quiet beauty that bothered people. Hazel eyes, a slender waist despite the meager food, and a calm manner that conveyed dignity. Not that Helen wanted attention. On the contrary, but Eula saw betrayal where there was only exhaustion. In the 2nd week of August, a cattle buyer from Denver arrived at the boarding house, a man of about 40, well-dressed with a gold chain on his vest. His name was Gerald. During dinner, he asked Helen if breakfast would be served at 6 or 7, a simple, functional question. Helen answered, "At 6, sir," and headed for the kitchen. But Eula saw the exchange of words and interpreted it as flirtation. That same night, she entered her mother's room crying, claiming that Helen was trying to seduce the guest, that it was shameful, that the boarding house would get a bad reputation. Constance, who adored her daughter with the blindness of those who love too much and see too little, believed her instantly. The next day, when Gerald came down for coffee, he found the table set, but no sign of Helen. Constance explained in a sugary voice that the maid was indisposed. The cattleman ate, paid, and left. As soon as his carriage disappeared down the road, Constance called Helen into the sewing room. The accusation came dry, without preamble. 2 silver candlesticks are missing from the dining room, Constance said, arms crossed over her broad chest. Eula stood beside her mother, eyes downcast, feigning sadness. Helen felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. "What candlesticks, Mrs. Fitzroy?" she asked, her voice failing. "Don't play the fool, Helen," the landlady retorted. "You were the only one who cleaned the room yesterday. The candlesticks were there in the morning. By afternoon they were gone. I am being robbed under my own roof." Helen tried to explain that she had indeed cleaned the room, but the candlesticks were already gone. That perhaps Eula herself had put them away, or a guest, or perhaps they were simply misplaced. Constance slammed her hand on the side table with enough force to make the oil lamp tremble. "Are you calling me a liar now? Are you accusing my daughter?" Helen felt hot tears fill her eyes, but didn't let them fall. "I am not accusing anyone, Mrs. Fitzroy. I am just saying I didn't take any candlesticks. You can search my room, my bundle, whatever you wish." And Constance did search. She went to the little room in the back, opened the cloth bundle where Helen kept her 2 changes of clothes, overturned the thin mattress, looked under the crate that served as a nightstand. She found nothing, of course, because there was nothing to find. But instead of apologizing, Constance hardened even more. "You must have hidden them elsewhere, or already sold them. I won't have a thief in my house, Helen. You have until noon tomorrow to gather your things and leave. I won't call the sheriff because I'm a Christian, and I pity your situation. But I want you far away from here." Helen stood paralyzed. Tomorrow at noon, 12 hours, where would she go? She had no living relatives, no friends close enough to ask for shelter. No money saved, because the $3 barely paid for soap and sewing thread. She tried to argue, begged for a chance to prove her innocence, suggested calling the Reverend to vouch for her character. Constance was inflexible. "My decision is made. You can go." That night Helen didn't sleep a wink. She sat on the edge of the hard mattress, staring at the open bundle on the floor, trying to think of a way out that didn't appear. She thought about asking Reverend August for help, but what could he do besides pray? She thought about looking for work at another ranch, but without a reference from her last employer, who would hire her? She thought, in a brief and dark moment, if it wouldn't be easier to walk to the river and let the current take everything away. But faith, weak and staggering as it was, still held her back. Thomas wouldn't want to see her give up like that. The next day dawned. Helen prepared breakfast for the last time, washed the cups, swept the room where the damned candlesticks had never been, and at 10 in the morning took her bundle. Constance didn't even appear to say goodbye. Eula watched from the second-floor window with a look of barely disguised victory. Helen walked out the door of the Acacia boarding house and stepped onto the dirt street under the strong August sun that hurt her eyes. She walked without a clear destination, just to get away. She passed the church, the square where children played tag, and Mr. Thompson's general store. It was right there, standing in the shade of the cottonwood tree in front of the store, that Helen heard the conversation that would change everything. 2 men were sitting on the wooden bench beside the door. One was Mr. Thompson himself, the store owner, a stout man with a grey moustache. The other Helen didn't know, but she noticed him. Tall, broad shoulders, worn leather hat, boots dusty with red earth. Face sunburnt, features tired. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried urgency. "I need a wife by tomorrow, Theo. It's not a request one makes lightly, I know, but it's the situation I'm in." Thompson scratched his beard, visibly uncomfortable. "Robert, my friend, marriage isn't a sack of flour you buy from one day to the next. What is this story?" The man, Robert, sighed deeply. "It's complicated. An inheritance matter. My father's will has a clause I didn't take seriously until now. I need to be married before I turn 35, or the ranch passes to someone else. Tomorrow is my birthday." Thompson let out a low whistle. "And you left it to the last minute like this?" "Not on purpose," Robert defended himself, voice hoarse. "After I lost Claire, I couldn't think of anything else. I didn't remember dates, papers, nothing. It was my lawyer who nudged me last week, saying the deadline is up. I tried to resolve it other ways, but there's no way around it. The law is clear. Either I marry or I lose everything. Helen felt her heart race. She stood motionless, pretending to look at the street, but every nerve tuned to the conversation. "And what woman is going to accept marrying like that, out of nowhere?" asked Thompson. "Do you at least have someone in mind?" Robert shook his head, a heavy gesture. "I don't. After I was widowed, I didn't look at anyone else. And after the girl, it got even harder. But now I have no choice. I'm offering an honest marriage, a home, food, respect. I'm not asking for love. I just need someone who accepts signing the paper and living on the ranch. We can live like acquaintances if she wants. I just need to fulfill the will's requirement." Thompson rubbed his face with his hands. "This is madness, Robert." "It's desperation," the rancher corrected. "And desperation doesn't choose pretty paths." Helen felt something strange move inside her chest. It wasn't hope yet. It was smaller than that. It was a crack, a possibility where before there was only a wall. She looked at the bundle in her hand, looked at the empty street ahead, thought of the windowless room that was no longer hers, thought of the false accusation, the lack of future, the river that still whispered dark invitations in the back of her mind. And then, before courage fled, Helen adjusted the shawl over her shoulders and walked up to the two men. "Excuse me," she said, voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Thompson and Robert looked up, surprised. The merchant recognized Helen immediately. "Mrs. Vance, good morning. Do you need something?" Helen swallowed hard. She looked straight at Robert. "I overheard your conversation by accident, sir. Forgive my rudeness, but I am in a situation similar to yours. I need a place to stay. You need a wife. Perhaps we can solve each other's problem." The silence that followed was so dense, Helen could hear her own heart beating in her temples. Robert stared at her with an indecipherable expression. Thompson opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mrs. Vance, are you serious?" "I am," she replied without taking her eyes off the rancher. "I know it sounds crazy, and maybe it is, but I have no family, I have no home, and I have nowhere to go. If you are offering an honest marriage and respect, it is more than I will find anywhere else." Robert stood up slowly. He was taller than Helen had imagined. Dark eyes, deep, tired, but not cruel. He studied her face in silence for long seconds. "You know this would be an arrangement, don't you? I can't promise feelings I don't have." "Neither can I," Helen replied with raw honesty. "But I can promise honesty, work, and a kept word." Something flickered in Robert's eyes. Perhaps recognition of equal desperation, perhaps respect for the courage. He extended his hand. "Robert Mercer, I have a ranch 20 miles from here. I raise cattle, grow corn. The house is big but empty. I can offer a room of your own, food on the table, and my last name. Nothing more." Helen squeezed his hand. It was calloused, warm, firm. "Helen Vance, I can cook, sew, keep a house. I can offer respectful company and help with whatever is needed. Nothing more." Thompson looked from one to the other, as if watching a miracle or a tragedy and not knowing which. "You two are crazy. But if it's what you want, may God bless it." Robert released Helen's hand. "It needs to be today," he said. "We can marry at sundown, if the Reverend agrees. Do you have any objection, ma'am?" Helen thought of the boarding house, of Eula, of Constance, of the candlesticks she never stole. She thought of sleeping on the street, or begging for work from door to door. She thought that perhaps this man was bad, or crazy, or dangerous. But she looked into his eyes and saw the same exhaustion she felt. She saw someone who was also at the limit. "I have no objection," she replied, and so, in less than 5 minutes of conversation, Helen Vance agreed to marry a stranger. The next few hours passed in a strange blur. Robert went to Reverend August's house. The vicar, a man of 60 with a soft spot for others' misfortunes, heard the whole story, frowned, sighed, but agreed to officiate the ceremony at 6 in the evening. He insisted on speaking with Helen alone. "My child," the Reverend held her hands in his, which were dry and bony. "Are you sure about this? Marriage is a sacrament, not a store transaction." "Reverend," Helen felt like crying but held it back. "I don't have a pretty choice. I have a possible choice. This man seems honest, and he is offering me dignity. It is more than I have right now." The Reverend squeezed her hands tightly. "May God guide you then, and if he is not good to you, come back here. This church is your home too." Helen thanked him, moved. Robert arranged the witnesses, Thompson and his wife Marceline. Helen didn't have a wedding dress. Marceline, a kind-hearted woman, lent her a light blue dress that had been stored away. It had a wine stain on the hem, but it was hidden in the folds. Helen combed her hair, braided it, pinned it up. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror of the vestry and saw a ghost bride. The ceremony was quick. The chapel was empty except for the 5 present. Robert wore his Sunday best, smelling of lye soap and earth. Helen held the sprig of rosemary that Marceline had hastily picked from the garden. The Reverend said the prayers, asked the questions. Robert answered, "I do," with a firm voice. Helen answered, "I do," with a trembling voice. They exchanged simple silver bands Robert had bought that afternoon from the town silversmith, thin, cold on the fingers. "I pronounce you man and wife," said Reverend August. Robert didn't kiss the bride. He just nodded, a dry gesture of greeting. Helen returned the nod. They signed the register. Thompson and Marceline signed as witnesses. They left the church as the bell tolled 6 times. Outside, Robert pointed to the wagon hitched to 2 horses. "We're going to the ranch now. The trip takes about 3 hours. Did you bring belongings?" Helen lifted the small bundle. "Just this." Robert helped her up into the wagon. His touch on her arm was brief, careful, without intimacy. He stowed the bundle in the back, said goodbye to Thompson and Marceline with handshakes, climbed onto the bench, took the reins. The wagon began to move. Hope's Crossing faded behind them. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink. Helen looked one last time at the small town where she had suffered so much. She didn't miss it. She felt relief. Robert drove in silence. Helen didn't know what to say. They stayed like that, side by side, rocked by the jolting of the wagon and the sound of hooves on the dirt road. Occasionally Robert glanced at her. Helen felt the gaze but didn't return it. She was too tired to decipher what those dark eyes hid. After an hour of travel, he finally spoke. "The ranch is called Good Hope. Irony, I know. Inherited it from my father. He died 4 years ago. I have 50 head of cattle, a cornfield, a small orchard. The house has 6 rooms. There's a cook, Josephine, who lives in a cabin out back. She's trustworthy. She'll help you with whatever you need." Helen listened, absorbing every piece of information. "I can help in the kitchen, in the garden, wherever necessary." Robert shook his head. "You don't need to work like a slave. That's not why I brought you. I just need you to—" He hesitated, choosing his words. "I just need you to pretend well. The mother-in-law will try to prove the marriage isn't real. She'll send people to inspect, ask questions. We need to look like a real husband and wife." Helen felt a chill down her spine. "Who is your mother-in-law?" "Beatrice, my first wife, Claire's mother." Robert's voice dropped even lower. "Claire died in childbirth with our daughter 7 years ago. Beatrice never forgave me, said it was my fault for getting her pregnant. And then—" His voice cracked. "Then Cecily died too, 6 months ago. A fever that came too fast. Beatrice said it was my negligence, that I didn't take care of her right, that I killed them both. Helen turned to look at him. The pain on his face was so naked it hurt to see. "I am so sorry," she said softly. Robert didn't answer. He just gripped the reins tighter. They traveled another hour in heavy silence. Night fell. Stars appeared, so many they looked like holes in the black canvas of the sky. The air grew cold. Helen pulled her shawl tighter over her shoulders. Robert noticed and, without saying a word, grabbed a horse blanket from the back and handed it to her. "Thank you," murmured Helen. He just nodded. Finally, they turned onto a smaller road, flanked by wooden fences. In the distance, Helen saw lantern light. The ranch. Robert drove the wagon up to the front of a large house with whitewashed walls, a clay roof, and a wide porch. It had dark windows, all closed. It looked like a sleeping house, or an abandoned one. "We're here," announced Robert, climbing down from the wagon. He helped Helen down, took her bundle. "Let's go inside." He opened the front door. The smell that came out was of dust and silence. He lit a lantern on the entryway sideboard. The weak light revealed a spacious living room with furniture covered in white sheets, a clean but dull wooden floor, walls empty except for darker rectangular marks where pictures had once been. "Forgive the appearance," Robert said without looking at her. "I stopped using this part of the house a long time ago." He led Helen down a hallway, showed her the kitchen, large with a wood stove and a long table, showed the pantry, the bathroom in the back, and then stopped in front of a closed door. "This will be your room," he said, pushing the door open. Helen entered. The room was spacious. It had a double bed with a white crocheted spread, a wooden dresser, a window with lace curtains, everything clean, but with the air of a place uninhabited for a long time. "It's beautiful," said Helen sincerely. Robert left her bundle on the bed. "It was my sister who lived here before she married and moved away, about 10 years ago. It's just as she left it." Helen touched the bedspread. It was soft. How long had it been since she slept in a real bed? "My room is at the end of the hall," Robert continued, his voice strangely formal. "If you need anything during the night, you can call. Josephine arrives early in the morning. She'll make breakfast." "All right." Robert stood in the doorway, as if wanting to say something more but not knowing how. Helen waited. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you for accepting this. I know it's strange, but thank you." Helen met his eyes. "You're welcome, and thank you too. You can call me Robert. Then you can call me Helen." He sketched something that was almost a smile. "Good night, Helen." "Good night, Robert." He closed the door. Helen heard his footsteps fading down the hall, heard a door open and close far away, and then complete silence. She sat on the bed, looked around. Beautiful room, big house, unknown husband, marriage without love, secrets she didn't even know yet. Helen took off her worn shoes, lay down on the bed without taking off the borrowed dress, closed her eyes, and for the first time in months slept without the fear of being evicted in the morning. But in the middle of the night she woke up to a strange sound, sharp, distant. She got up, went to the window, opened the curtain. Outside, under the moonlight, she saw Robert's silhouette sitting on the porch, head in his hands. And she realized the sound that had woken her was weeping. The weeping of a man who had lost everything and was now pretending to have something. Helen watched for a long time. Then she closed the curtain slowly and went back to bed, her heart heavy. She had married a stranger. But this stranger carried a pain so great it leaked through the cracks of the night, and Helen, without understanding why yet, felt a desire to help. Helen woke up to the smell of coffee and burning wood. It took a few seconds to remember where she was. The strange room, the soft bed, the sunlight coming through the lace curtain. And then the memory came back in full. The hasty marriage, the night journey, Robert crying alone on the porch. She got up quickly, smoothed her wrinkled dress, pinned her hair as best she could. There was no mirror in the room. She opened the door slowly and followed the smell of coffee to the kitchen. There she found a woman of about 50, black, wearing a plaid apron and a red kerchief tied around her hair. She was stirring a pot on the stove, humming softly. Upon seeing Helen, she stopped and broke into a wide smile that lit up her entire face. "Good morning, child. You must be Helen. I'm Josephine." Helen felt a strange relief at that immediate friendliness. "Good morning, Mrs. Josephine." The woman waved a hand. "Just Josephine, no Mrs. I'm not the boss. I'm a worker just like you were. Robert told me everything last night when he got back. Said he married suddenly. That you agreed to help him. You're a brave woman." Helen didn't know if brave was the right word, but she accepted the compliment. "I'm still trying to understand how everything will work." Josephine poured coffee into a tin mug and handed it to her. "Sit here, have some coffee, eat this bread I just took out of the oven. I'll explain everything." Helen sat at the long table. The coffee was strong and hot, just the way she liked it. The bread smelled of butter and had a crispy crust. It had been a long time since she ate something so good for breakfast. "Robert woke up before the sun," Josephine recounted while slicing more bread. "Went out to tend to the cattle. He'll be back only for lunch. Left a message saying for you to make yourself at home, explore the house, rest. Said you can touch everything, except a room at the end of the hall on the left side. That one has to stay closed." Helen felt immediate curiosity. "What room is that?" Josephine's expression grew heavy. "It's Cecily's room. His daughter who died. He doesn't let anyone in. Locked the door and carries the key in his pocket. It's been 6 months, but for him, it feels like yesterday." Helen remembered the pain in Robert's voice when he spoke of the girl the night before. Felt her chest tighten. How did she die? Josephine sighed, sat in the chair next to Helen. It was too fast. The girl was 6 years old, healthy, bright, happy. One Saturday morning, she woke up with a fever. We thought it was just a cold. I gave her tea, put a cold cloth on her forehead. But the fever wouldn't go down. On Sunday, it got worse. Robert went to get the doctor in town. When they got back, the girl was already delirious, calling for the mother she never knew. The doctor said it was brain fever. There was nothing to be done. On Monday morning, she was gone. Helen felt tears fill her eyes. "My God!" Robert almost went mad," Josephine continued with a choked voice. "Went 3 days without eating, without sleeping, just sitting in the room next to her body until the burial. After that, he became another man, almost stopped talking, stopped living, just worked, ate little, slept even less. I watched him waste away, and Beatrice, instead of helping, only made it worse." "Who is Beatrice?" "His mother-in-law, mother of Claire, who was the first wife." "That woman is a cross to bear, my child. She was always controlling, but after her daughter died in childbirth, she became bitter as gall. Blames Robert to this day, says he killed Claire by getting her pregnant, as if a child were the fault of only one. And when Cecily died, Beatrice threw in his face that it was God's punishment, that he wasn't even fit to take care of a child, said such barbarities that if I told you, you wouldn't believe." Helen felt anger rise hot in her throat. "What kind of person says that to someone who is grieving?" "Bad people," Josephine replied simply. "People who prefer to blame others than accept that sometimes life is just unfair. Beatrice has money, has land, but has no heart, and now she wants to take Robert's ranch." "How so?" Josephine looked around as if someone might be listening. "There's a clause in his father's will. Said Robert only inherited the ranch if he was married when he turned 35. If he wasn't, the property would pass to the nearest relative, which in this case would be Beatrice, because she's the widow of Robert's father's brother." It's a family mess, but basically, she gets everything if she proves yesterday's marriage was fake. Helen felt as if the floor had opened beneath her. So that was it. Robert's desperation, the urgency. He didn't just need a wife, he needed to save everything he had. "Did he tell you this?" asked Josephine. "He told me a little," Helen lied, "but I didn't know the mother-in-law was involved." "She's involved, all right. Beatrice already sent word she's coming here in a few days to meet you. She's going to try to catch you in a lie. She's going to look for proof that the marriage isn't real. You need to be careful, child. That woman is dangerous." Helen drank the rest of the coffee, but now the taste was bitter. She had accepted the marriage thinking only of having a roof and food. She hadn't imagined she would enter the middle of a family war. Josephine touched her hand gently. "I know it's a lot at once, but Robert is a good man, Helen. I've worked for him for 15 years, watched him grow, marry, suffer. He doesn't deserve to lose the land his father sweated to build. And you look like someone who has suffered too much as well. Maybe you two can help each other." Helen didn't answer, just nodded. After breakfast, Josephine showed her the whole house. It was bigger than Helen had imagined. Besides the bedrooms, it had a dining room with a table for 12, a sewing room full of dust, a study with a bookshelf and a rosewood desk. Everything clean but lifeless, like a museum of a house that was once happy. When they passed the left hallway, Helen saw the closed door at the end. It was dark wood with an iron latch. No sound came from inside. Josephine crossed herself and quickened her pace. "Don't go near that door," she warned. "Robert gets furious if anyone touches it." Helen looked at the door one more time before following. Felt something strange, not fear. It was a dense sadness, almost palpable, as if the very air around that door was heavier. They spent the afternoon organizing. Josephine helped Helen put her few clothes in the dresser, gave her 2 dresses that had belonged to Robert's sister and were stored in a trunk. "They're pretty and will fit you. Mariana isn't coming back here anyway. Married a rancher from Texas and forgot she has a brother." Helen tried on the dresses. One was moss green, the other navy blue. Both simple but well sewn, good fabric. They fit almost perfectly. In the late afternoon, they heard the sound of hooves. Robert had returned. Helen felt nervousness tighten her stomach. She still didn't know how to act around him. They were married on paper, but strangers in practice. He entered through the kitchen door, took off his hat, hung it on the hook. There was sweat on his face and dirt on his boots. He looked at Helen with a careful expression. "Good morning. Or good afternoon. Did you sleep well?" "I did, yes, thank you. And you?" Robert made a vague gesture. "Slept enough. Did Josephine show you the house?" "She did. It's beautiful." "It was," he corrected without thinking, then seemed to regret the word. "I'm going to wash up." "What time will dinner be ready, Josephine?" "In half an hour, boss." Robert left. Helen heard his bedroom door close. Josephine looked at her with pity. "He doesn't know how to talk to people anymore. Have patience." Helen nodded. Dinner was silent. Josephine had prepared chicken stew with cornmeal mush and collard greens. It was delicious. Robert ate slowly, eyes on his plate. Helen ate too, trying not to make too much noise with the cutlery. The only conversation was Robert asking if she needed anything, and Helen answering no. After dinner, Josephine went home to her little house. Robert said he was going to check some papers in the study. Helen stayed alone in the kitchen, washing the dishes, thinking about how this was going to work. Fake marriage. But that needed to look real. When she finished, she went to her room. Changed clothes, put on the simple nightgown Marceline had put in the bundle as a gift. Brushed her hair. She was tired but restless. She left the room, walked through the dark hallways. The house at night was even more silent. Suddenly she found herself standing in front of the locked door. Cecily's room. Helen didn't know why she had come there, just felt a strange attraction, put her hand on the wood of the door. It was cold. On the other side was a dead girl's room. Toys put away, bed made, eternal silence. "Cecily," whispered Helen without knowing why. "I'm so sorry." And then she heard the voice behind her. "Step away from there." Helen turned, startled. Robert was at the end of the hall, face tense, fists clenched. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I wasn't going to open it. I was just—" "Just what?" he cut in, voice harsh. "Curious? Want to see what's inside? Want to rifle through my daughter's things?" "No," Helen defended herself. "I just felt like—" "Like what?" His voice rose. "Like invading the only place that is still just mine." Helen felt tears burn her eyes. "That wasn't it. I just wanted—" She took a deep breath. "I lost people too, Robert. I know how it hurts. I wasn't trying to disrespect." His face changed. The anger drained away, giving place to something worse. Pure pain, undisguised. He ran a hand through his hair, a tired gesture. "Sorry. I shouldn't have yelled." They stood still, looking at each other, the air dense between them. Robert was the first to move. He sat on the floor, back resting against the wall, a gesture so unexpected Helen was left without reaction. "She was 6, he said, voice low. Brown hair that curled when it rained. Green eyes she got from her mother. Laughed at anything, loved chasing chickens in the yard, was scared of thunder. Slept hugging a rag bear Josephine sewed, called him Thomas." Helen felt her heart skip. "Thomas was my husband's name," she whispered. Robert looked at her, surprised. "Was it?" "It was. He died 3 years ago, wagon accident." "I'm sorry." "Me too, for your daughter." Robert looked ahead again. "After she died, I couldn't go in that room anymore. Locked it the day of the funeral and never opened it again. Her clothes are still in the wardrobe, toys scattered where she left them. The bed still has the sheet she used the last night. I know it's sick. I know I should clean, pack up, move on. But I can't." Helen slowly sat down on the floor, too, a few steps from him. "It's not sick. It's grief. And grief has no right way." Robert turned his head to look at her. The weak light of the lantern on the dresser illuminated half his face. "You really understand, don't you?" "I do. When Thomas died, I kept his ring in a little box, opened it every day to look. Cried, holding it. Did that for a whole year. People said I had to forget, move on, find another man. But I couldn't. It felt like betrayal. And now, Helen thought, now it still hurts, but hurts less, and it doesn't feel like betrayal to live anymore." Robert stayed quiet for a long time, then asked, "Why did you agree to marry me?" Truly, Helen could have lied, could have invented something pretty, but there was too much raw sincerity in that moment to waste with lies. "Because I had nowhere to go. I was accused of a theft I didn't commit, was going to be evicted, have no family, no money. When I heard you asking for a wife, I saw a chance to survive. It was self-interest, nothing noble." Robert almost smiled. "At least you're honest. And you? Why did you accept me of all people? You didn't even know me. Because you had courage in your eyes, and desperation too, like me. I thought someone desperate wouldn't judge me, and would understand an arrangement without feelings." Helen nodded. "Makes sense." They sat on the hallway floor, two strangers married, sharing silence and secrets. It was Helen who broke the silence. "Josephine told me about the will, about the clause, and your mother-in-law." Robert closed his eyes. "She told everything then." "She did. And I understand now why you needed to marry fast." "Are you angry?" Helen thought. Should she be? Maybe. But mostly she was tired. "No, I wasn't totally honest with you either. We're even." Robert let out a short laugh, joyless. What a pair we make, two liars trying to fake truth. Maybe we can manage, said Helen, if we really try. Robert looked at her with something new in his eyes. Faint hope, but hope. Would you stay, even knowing everything, even knowing Beatrice will try to destroy you? Helen held his gaze. I have nowhere to go back to. And you don't seem like a bad man. You seem like a broken man. I understand that. So yes, I'll stay. Robert extended his hand. Helen squeezed it. The grip lasted longer than necessary. Thank you, he said. You're welcome. They got up. Robert looked at the locked door one more time. Someday I'll open it, but not yet. When you're ready, he nodded. Good night, Helen. Good night, Robert. Each went to their room. But from that night on, something had changed. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of trust. The following days fell into a strange but functional routine. Robert woke up early, went out to deal with the cattle and the fields. Helen helped Josephine in the kitchen, cleaned the house, mended torn clothes. At night, they ate together, talked little, but without the hostile silence of the first day. Robert talked about work. Helen talked about what she had done in the house. Small conversations of people trying to know each other. On the fourth day of marriage, Helen was hanging clothes on the line when she saw Robert fixing the corral fence. He took off his shirt because of the heat. Helen saw the muscular back, the scars of hard work, the sweat running down his tanned skin. Felt something warm in her chest. Looked away quickly, ashamed of her own thought. But that night at dinner, she caught herself looking at the way he held the fork, the shape of his hands, the way his hair fell on his forehead when he looked down. Robert looked too. Helen noticed. Quick glances averted when she noticed. He looked when she laughed at something Josephine said, when she brushed her hair on the porch, when she hummed washing dishes. If you are liking this story, leave your like here so we know you are following along. They didn't speak about it. But it was there. Silent attraction neither of them expected to feel. It was on the morning of the 7th day of marriage that everything changed. Helen was in the garden picking lettuce when she heard the sound of a carriage. She stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, looked at the road. A black carriage pulled by 2 horses was coming toward the house. Elegant, shiny, completely out of place on that simple ranch. Josephine appeared at the kitchen door, face tense. It's her. Beatrice. She arrived sooner than I expected. Helen felt her stomach turn. Robert was far away in the north pasture. No time to get him. The carriage stopped in front of the house. A driver got down, opened the door, and out came a woman who seemed made of ice and mourning. Beatrice must have been about 58. Black silk dress, black hat with a veil, black gloves, pale skin, thin lips, dark eyes that swept everything with calculated contempt. She carried an ivory cane, not because she needed it, but because it gave an air of authority. She looked Helen up and down. You must be the new wife. How quickly my son-in-law found a replacement. The tone was pure poison. Helen swallowed her fear and replied with a firm voice, I am Helen. You must be Mrs. Beatrice. No need to fake politeness, cut the woman, climbing the porch steps with heavy thuds of the cane. I know exactly what you are. An opportunist who took advantage of a weak man's desperation. Helen felt anger boil, but held it. Josephine had warned her. Beatrice wanted to provoke. Robert isn't here, said Helen. He went to work. Even better, I want to speak with you alone anyway. Beatrice entered the house without asking permission, as if she owned it. Looked around with an expression of disgust. What decay! My daughter kept this house impeccable. Now it's becoming a ruin. Helen gritted her teeth. The house is clean. Clean but dead, just like this ridiculous marriage. Beatrice sat in the living room armchair, crossed her hands over the cane, fixed her eyes on Helen. Let's get straight to the point. I know this marriage is a farce. I know you were bought or tricked or offered yourself out of interest. It doesn't matter. The will is clear. Marriage needs to be true, with intention of communion of life. Union of convenience doesn't count. Helen kept her voice calm. Our marriage is true. Beatrice gave a cold smile. Is it really? Then tell me, where did you meet my son-in-law? When did you start courting? How long were you engaged? Why did no one in town know of your existence until the day of the wedding? Helen felt the ground shake, but remembered what Robert had said. We need to look real. She lifted her chin. I met Robert a few months ago. We met a few times in town. He didn't speak of it because he was grieving, afraid of people's reaction. When we decided to marry, it was fast because neither of us wanted a big ceremony. How convenient. And where were you before? Doing what? I worked at a boarding house. I left because the owner unjustly accused me of theft. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. So you're a thief. I am not. It was a false accusation. Of course. And Robert, poor thing, offered salvation. What a charitable man. The voice dripped sarcasm. Or what a man desperate not to lose his inheritance. Helen took a step forward. You can think what you want, but our marriage is legal. It was witnessed, registered, and I am staying here. Beatrice stood up slowly. We shall see. I will investigate every detail, every conversation, every movement of you two. And when I prove it's a lie, I will take this ranch. Robert will be left with nothing. And you will go back to the gutter you came from. The words hurt because they touched Helen's deepest fear, but she didn't let it show. You can try. Beatrice walked to the door, stopped, turned. Oh, and one thing. My granddaughter died in this house. My daughter died because of this man. This land has my family's blood. I won't leave it in the hands of an opportunist and a negligent murderer. She left, slamming the door. Helen stood paralyzed, trembling. Josephine ran to her, held her shoulders. You were strong, child. You were very strong, but Helen didn't feel strong. She felt terrified. When Robert returned in the late afternoon and Helen told him what happened, she saw his face turn grey. She won't stop, he said, voice hoarse. She'll make our lives hell. Then we need to be more convincing, replied Helen. Robert looked at her. How? Helen took a deep breath. We need to look like a real couple, not just in front of strangers, all the time, because she'll send people to spy. She'll set traps. She hesitated, we need to act as if we were truly husband and wife. Robert understood what she didn't say. You want us to share the same room? Helen felt her face heat up. It doesn't have to be like that, but maybe it should look like it. People will ask, will notice. Robert rubbed his face, tired. You're right. He looked at her carefully. But I won't force you to do anything. If we sleep in the same room, I'll sleep on the floor. No need, the bed is big. We can share like friends. Married friends, corrected Robert with a half smile. That's it. Then it's agreed. That night, Helen moved her things to Robert's room. It was bigger than the one she occupied. Had a large double bed, a crucifix on the wall, heavy dresser, window that opened to the porch. Robert set up a makeshift divider with a sheet stretched between two nails. You stay on this side, I on the other, to have privacy. Helen thanked him. But when they blew out the lantern and lay down, each on their side of the bed, separated by 2 feet of distance and an ocean of discomfort, Helen lay awake for hours listening to his breathing. And Robert lay awake too, listening to hers. Neither slept well. But in the morning, when Josephine came in and saw they now shared the room, she smiled. Now that looks like a marriage. And when a ranch hand from the neighboring farm showed up with a message and saw Helen arranging Robert's things, the news spread. The two were really together. Beatrice found out the same day and was furious. She sent her lawyer, a thin man named Mr. Silvers, to visit the ranch. He arrived by surprise on a rainy afternoon, asked to speak with the couple, asked invasive questions. Since when do you sleep in the same room? Who sleeps on which side? Does Robert show affection in public? Does Helen always wear her ring? Robert answered everything with forced patience. Helen too. And in the end, Mr. Silvers left without getting anything concrete. But the pressure increased. Beatrice started spreading rumors in town, said Helen was a prostitute, that Robert paid her to fake the marriage, that the Reverend had been deceived. Some people believed it, others didn't, but everyone talked. Helen felt the stares when she went to the general store, heard the whispers when she passed the church. It was humiliating. But Robert stood by her side, literally, held her hand in the street, called her "my wife" out loud, defended her when someone insinuated something, and gradually Helen realized it wasn't just acting. Robert looked at her differently now, with care, with something that looked like tenderness, and she looked at him the same way. One night, 2 weeks after Beatrice's visit, they were sitting on the porch after dinner. The moon was full, the warm air smelled of jasmine. Robert had brought 2 cups of coffee. "Thank you," said Helen, taking hers. "You're welcome." They stayed in comfortable silence until Robert spoke. "I should have told you everything from the start. About the will, about Beatrice, about the risks. It wasn't fair to bring you into this without warning." Helen shook her head. "I didn't tell everything either, about the accusation, about how desperate I was. We both started wrong." "Maybe, but—" He looked at her. "I don't regret it. Bringing you. You made this house less empty." Helen felt her heart race. "You too. Gave me a place. And—" She took a deep breath. "And it's been good. More than I expected." Robert slowly reached out his hand, touched hers. Helen didn't pull away, interlaced her fingers with his. They stayed like that, holding hands, looking at the stars, and for the first time, the fake marriage began to seem real. In the weeks that followed, the ranch began to breathe again. Helen planted flowers in the abandoned garden. Robert fixed the front gate that had been creaking for months. Together, they removed the sheets covering the living room furniture. Slowly, the house ceased to be a mausoleum and returned to being a home. But Beatrice didn't rest. Letters from her lawyer arrived almost every week, demanding proof, questioning dates, threatening lawsuits. Robert answered each one with a patience Helen knew he didn't feel. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the clenched jaw, the way he gripped the pen too hard when signing the replies. "You don't have to do this alone," Helen said one night, finding him in the study surrounded by papers. Robert lifted tired eyes. "It's my responsibility." "We are married," she reminded him. "Now it's our responsibility." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded, a small gesture but full of meaning. "Sit here then. Help me answer this one." Helen pulled up a chair, sat beside him, so close their shoulders touched. Robert explained every point of the letter, every trap Beatrice was trying to set. Helen listened, suggested, disagreed when she thought necessary, and Robert listened to her too, with a respect that warmed her chest. They wrote the response together. When they finished, it was past midnight. Robert leaned back in the chair, rubbed his eyes. "You're sharp. Noticed things I hadn't seen." "I have practice dealing with bad people," Helen replied with a half-smile. "The landlady was a master at inventing accusations." Robert turned to her. "I'm sorry for what you went through there. It's over. Now I'm here. Good thing." The way he said it, quietly, almost whispered, made something melt inside her. Helen felt her face heat up, looked away, but Robert touched her chin gently, brought it back, his eyes in hers. Dark, deep, full of something neither had the courage to name yet. "Helen," he began, voice hoarse, but at that moment there was a knock on the door. Josephine appeared, worried. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a man at the door. Says he's a process server. Brought a summons." The magic broke. Robert stood up quickly. "At this hour? Now. He's waiting on the porch." Robert went there. Helen followed. The man was standing holding a sealed envelope, handed it to Robert with a neutral expression. "Summons in the name of Mr. Robert Mercer and wife Helen Mercer. Hearing set for the 15th of next month at the town courthouse. Presence mandatory." Robert took the envelope, hands shaking slightly. Signed the receipt. The official left. When he opened the letter, Helen saw his face turn white. "What is it?" "Beatrice filed for annulment of the marriage. She's alleging lack of consent, bad faith and fraud. If the judge accepts the arguments, our marriage is invalidated and I lose the ranch." Helen felt the ground vanish. "But we have proof. Witnesses. The Reverend Theo, Josephine." Robert shook his head, a heavy gesture. "She has money to buy better witnesses, has influence, and has enough hatred to destroy everything." "Then we fight harder," said Helen, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I won't let her win." Robert looked at her with something that looked like admiration. "Why are you doing this? You could leave. You don't need to stay and face this." Helen held his hands. "I'm doing it because I want to. Because this house became my house. Because you—" She hesitated, then continued. "Because you are important to me." His eyes widened. "Helen?" She didn't let him finish. Kissed him. Quick, impulsive, scared of her own courage. It was a short kiss, but enough to make the world stop. When she pulled away, Robert was looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. Helen felt panic. "Sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Yes, you should," he interrupted, and pulled her close, kissed her again. This time slowly, carefully, but with an intensity that took her breath away. When they separated, they were breathless. Robert rested his forehead against hers. "I feel it too," he whispered. "I've felt it for a long time. Just was afraid to admit it." "Why?" "Because it felt like betrayal, to Claire, to Cecily. Felt like if I let you in for real, I'd be forgetting them." Helen touched his face. "It's not forgetting. It's continuing to live. They would want this for you." Robert closed his eyes. Tears escaped. Helen wiped them with her thumb. They stayed embraced for a long time, right there on the porch, under the stars, witnessing the birth of something real. The following days were different. They still slept in the same bed, but now without the dividing sheet, still treated each other with respect, but now seasoned with touches, hand on waist when passing, quick kiss on the forehead in the morning, fingers interlaced at night. Josephine noticed the change and smiled, happy. Until the day of the discovery, Helen didn't expect arrived. It was Saturday afternoon, almost a month since the wedding. Robert had gone to town to settle things with the lawyer. Helen was in the room putting away washed clothes when she saw the key lying on the floor near his dresser. Picked it up, looked. It was small, dark iron, worn details. Her heart raced. She knew what key that was. Cecily's room. Robert must have dropped it from his pocket by mistake when he changed trousers that morning. Helen stood still, holding the key, debating. Should return it and pretend she didn't see. Should wait for Robert to come back and offer to help open it together. But curiosity was too strong, and more than curiosity, it was concern. Robert carried that closed room like a cross. Maybe seeing what was inside would help Helen understand better. Help better. Decided. Went to the hallway, stopped in front of the locked door. Put the key in the lock, trembled, turned. The door opened with a loud creak that echoed through the empty house. The smell that came out was of mold and sadness. Helen pushed the door slowly, entered. The room was exactly as Robert had said, untouched, frozen in time. The single bed still had the doll sheet, rumpled as if the child had just gotten up. On the floor, rag dolls scattered. On the small table, a glass half full of water, partly evaporated. In the open wardrobe, little dresses hanging in size order. And on the bed, a brown rag bear, patched in several places, with button eyes and an embroidered smile. Thomas. Helen felt tears fill her eyes. This wasn't just a room. It was a shrine of pain. Every object there screamed absence. She walked slowly, with reverence, as if stepping on holy ground, touched the bear. The texture was soft, worn from so much hugging. Imagined the little girl sleeping with it. Imagined Robert sitting there after the funeral, looking at all this, unable to move. It was then she saw the box under the bed, pulled it out. It was wooden, lid loose, opened it. Inside were letters, many, tied with faded red ribbon. Helen picked one, hesitated, then opened. The handwriting was childish, crooked, with some spelling mistakes, but legible. "Dear Mommy in heaven, today Daddy taught me to write your name. Claire, it's pretty. Josephine said you were pretty too. I wanted to know you. Daddy gets sad when I talk about you, but I talk anyway because you are my mom. One day will I find you? A kiss from Cecily." Helen read another. "Mommy, I turned 7 yesterday. Daddy made corn cake. I ate 3 pieces and got sick. He laughed. I like when he laughs. He laughs little. Grandma Beatrice came here and fought with him, said he killed you. Is that true?" Daddy cried after she left. "I hugged him. I don't want him to cry. Kisses, Cecily." Another. "Dear Mommy, Grandma said I look like you, that I have your eyes. Do you see me from where you are? Do you know I love you even without knowing you? I think so. Daddy says you are happy in heaven. I hope so. I love you. Cecily." Helen was crying openly now. There were dozens of letters, all written by the girl to her dead mother, all kept secret under the bed. Did Robert know about them? Or did Cecily hide them? Continued reading, unable to stop, and then reached the last one. "Mommy, I'm very hot. Head hurts. Josephine is taking care of me. Daddy went to get the doctor. I am scared. What if I die like you? What if I go to heaven and find you? I wanted to know you, but I don't want to leave Daddy alone. He needs me. I need him. Please help me get better. Kisses, your daughter Cecily." Helen sobbed. That was the last letter, written the day the fever started. The girl died 2 days later, heard sound of footsteps, turned. Robert was standing in the doorway, face white as wax. Helen stood up quickly, still holding the letters. "Robert, He didn't yell, didn't get angry, just looked at her, then at the room, then at the letters in her hand. "You opened it." The key fell. He's sorry, I shouldn't have." Robert entered the room slowly, as if walking on broken glass. Looked around, seeing everything for the first time in 6 months. His face was a mask of pain. Sat on the edge of his daughter's bed, picked up the bear, hugged it, and began to cry. Cry for real, deep sobs that shook his whole body. Helen dropped the letters, ran to him, hugged him. Robert clung to her as if he were sinking, cried on her shoulder for a time that seemed eternal. When he finally stopped, he was exhausted, wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Sorry." "Don't apologize," said Helen firmly. "You needed this." Robert looked at her. "Did you read the letters?" "Read some. Sorry for invading." He shook his head. "No, I never had the courage to read. Knew they existed. Cecily wrote in secret. Thought I didn't know, but I knew. After she died, I couldn't look. Was afraid of what I'd find." Helen picked up the box, held it out to him. "Maybe it's time." Robert took it, opened, read the first letter, then the second, went reading one by one while silent tears ran down. Helen stayed by his side, hand on his back, silent presence of support. When he finished, Robert held the last letter with both hands. "She was afraid to leave me alone," he whispered, "and I really am alone." "You're not," corrected Helen softly. Not anymore. Robert turned to her, eyes red but clear, as if the crying had washed away years of pain. Helen, I spent so much time trapped here in this grief, in this guilt, thinking if I moved on, I'd be disrespecting them. But you showed me it's possible to keep the memory without burying yourself too. She touched his face. Cecily would want you to be happy. Her letter says that. She loved you too much to want you suffering forever. Robert kissed the palm of her hand. I love you, he said. The words came out simple, true, without fear. It wasn't expected, it wasn't planned, but it's real. I love you, Helen. Her heart exploded. I love you too. They kissed right there, in the dead girl's room, surrounded by sad memories that finally could begin to turn into grateful memories. It wasn't forgetting, it was allowing new love to grow alongside the old love. They spent the whole afternoon in that room. Together, they folded Cecily's little clothes, put them away with care in a leather trunk, separated some toys to donate to poor children in town, as Robert knew his daughter would like, kept the letters in a new box, along with Thomas the bear, to preserve. When they finished, the room was empty but clean. It wasn't a shrine of pain anymore. It was just a room that once housed a loved child. Robert closed the door, but didn't lock it. Don't need to anymore, he said. That night they dined embracing. Josephine saw Robert's red eyes, the new way he looked at Helen, and understood everything without needing to ask, just served extra food and prayed silently, giving thanks. But peace didn't last long. 2 days before the hearing, Beatrice appeared again. This time she wasn't alone. Brought the lawyer, a lady Helen didn't know, and 2 men who looked like witnesses. Robert received everyone in the living room, with Helen by his side. Beatrice sat like a queen, venomous look. I came to make a last offer, she announced. Give up the ranch voluntarily, Robert. Hand everything to me without a fight. In exchange, I won't expose you and your whore in court. Helen felt anger explode. I am not a whore. Beatrice ignored her completely. I have 3 witnesses who will swear you 2 arranged this marriage days before, that it was negotiated, that it is fraud. Lie all you want, replied Robert with a hard voice. The truth is, Helen is my wife, and we will prove it at the hearing. Beatrice smiled, cold gesture. We shall see. She got up, signaled for the others to follow. Before leaving, turned. Oh, Robert, one last thing. My daughter died because of you. My granddaughter died because of your negligence. You deserve nothing, neither land, nor happiness, nor peace. I will ensure you lose everything. Robert turned white. Helen saw the pain return to his eyes. But this time, she didn't let him sink alone. Took a step forward, put herself between Robert and Beatrice. You lost your daughter and your granddaughter. And that is pain I don't wish on anyone, said Helen, with a voice that trembled but didn't break. But turning that pain into hate won't bring them back, only spreads more suffering. Robert suffered as much as you. He loved Claire, loved Cecily, and lost both. Do you think destroying him will make your pain go away? It won't. It will just add another loss, because deep down he is all that remains of your daughter and your granddaughter. He is their living memory. Beatrice stood paralyzed. The mask of coldness trembled. Don't speak of them, she whispered. You have no right. Yes, I do, because now I am part of this family, and families take care of each other, don't destroy each other. The silence that followed was dense. Beatrice looked from Helen to Robert, confused expression, as if she didn't know what to do anymore in the face of something other than hate. Then turned and left without more words. The lawyer and witnesses followed, visibly uncomfortable. When they were alone, Robert pulled Helen into a hug, so tight it hurt. Thank you, he whispered in her ear. Thank you. Always, she replied. The day of the hearing arrived. The courthouse was full. Beatrice on one side with her lawyer and witnesses, Robert and Helen on the other, with Reverend August, Theo, and Josephine as defense witnesses. The judge, a man of 50 with a white beard, heard the arguments. Beatrice's lawyer spoke first, alleging fraud, bad faith, economic interest. Presented the witnesses who swore they saw Robert looking for a wife in a hurry. Then it was the defense's turn. Robert's lawyer, a young but competent man, called Reverend August. The vicar testified that although the marriage was quick, he witnessed sincerity in both. Theo confirmed he saw the conversation at the store, but also saw Helen's courage in offering herself. Josephine told how the house changed since Helen arrived, how Robert smiled again, how the two clearly loved each other. The judge heard everything, then asked to speak with Helen and Robert alone. If you liked it so far, leave your like so we know you are following this moving story. The three stayed in his chambers. The judge crossed his hands on the desk. I'll be direct. Cases of marriage for interest are common, and usually when there's a will clause involved, there's fraud. But you two seem sincere to me, so I'm going to ask some questions, and I want total honesty. You can ask, said Robert. The judge looked at Helen. Did you accept marrying him for interest in the ranch? Helen took a deep breath. I accepted because I had nowhere to go. Didn't know about the ranch, didn't know about inheritance, just knew he offered a roof and respect. It was interest of survival, not greed. And now? What do you feel for him? Now I love him. Truly, it's not an arrangement anymore. It's a choice. The judge nodded, turned to Robert. And you, sir? Married because of the will? Married out of desperation, admitted Robert. Needed to fulfill the clause not to lose the ranch. But I chose Helen because I saw in her someone honest, brave, and today I thank God every day for that choice, because she saved me, not the ranch, me. The judge stayed silent for a long time, studying the two, finally sighed. I'll be honest too. Legally this marriage is valid. It was witnessed, registered, consummated as reported. But the question isn't just legal, it's moral. A will with a matrimonial clause is a tool of control. Your father wanted to force you to marry. That is questionable, but the law is the law. He picked up a pen, wrote something in the file. I'm denying the request for annulment. The marriage remains valid. The ranch remains with Mr. Robert Mercer and his wife Helen Mercer. However, I make a recommendation. Make peace with Mrs. Beatrice if possible. Family hatred only generates tragedy. Robert and Helen left the chambers holding hands, hearts racing. When the judge announced the decision publicly, Beatrice stood up, face red. This is injustice. It is the law, replied the judge calmly. You can appeal if you wish, but I warn you the chances are minimal. Beatrice looked at Robert with pure hate, then at Helen, and then something broke. Her shoulders slumped, her face collapsed, and for the first time she looked just old and tired. She left the courthouse without looking back. Helen felt pity, turned to Robert. We should try to talk to her. He hesitated, then nodded. Let's try. They went after Beatrice, caught up to her in the street near the carriage. Mrs. Beatrice, called Helen, please wait. The woman stopped but didn't turn. Robert took a step forward. Beatrice, I know you blame me. And maybe you're right about some things. I wasn't perfect. Didn't manage to save Claire. Didn't manage to save Cecily. And that kills me every day. But I loved them. And I know you did too. This fight won't bring them back. Will only destroy us more. Beatrice turned slowly. Her eyes were full of tears. You don't understand. They were all I had. When my daughter died, Cecily became my reason to live. I visited every week, brought candy, told stories, and suddenly she was gone too. And what was left? Nothing, just emptiness. Helen touched her arm. The memory is left, and the chance to honor them by living well, not destroying yourself. Beatrice looked at Helen. Didn't you steal him from me? No, I love him. But that doesn't erase the love he had for the others. There is room for everyone. The woman stayed silent, then, surprisingly, began to cry. Cry for real, without control, without a mask. Helen hugged her. Beatrice resisted for a second, then surrendered, crying on the shoulder of this stranger who could have been an enemy but chose to be a bridge. Robert watched, moved. Then he approached too. The three stood there in the street, embracing, crying together for the losses everyone carried. When they separated, Beatrice wiped her face. "Sorry," she said, voice hoarse. "For everything. For the malice. For the accusations. I was blind with pain." "I apologize too," said Robert, "for not seeking you out, for pushing you away. You are Cecily's grandmother, deserved to have been part of her life until the end." "Can I visit her grave?" asked Beatrice timidly. "You can. And can visit the ranch too, whenever you want." Beatrice sketched something that was almost a smile. "Thank you." It wasn't instant peace, but it was a start. The following months were of slow but real healing. Beatrice visited the ranch 3 times. The first time it was tense, the second less so. The third, she brought cake and stayed for lunch. They started talking about Claire and Cecily, sharing memories that were once sources of pain, but now became bridges. Helen and Robert fell into a sweet routine of a real couple. Worked together, laughed together, argued sometimes, but always made up. Robert taught Helen to ride a horse. Helen taught Robert to sew. Small moments that built a shared life. And then, 5 months after the wedding, Helen realized she was late. Told Josephine first. The cook shouted with joy, hugged her, crossed herself 15 times. Then Helen told Robert. They were on the porch at night, sitting side by side. Helen took his hand, placed it over her belly. "There's someone in here." Robert took a few seconds to understand. When he understood, his eyes filled with tears. "For real, for real." He kissed her, then kissed her belly, then cried with mixed joy and fear. "What if I'm not a good father again? What if something happens?" "You're going to be a great father," assured Helen, "and nothing will happen. We'll take good care of this child. Together." And they did. The pregnancy was smooth. Helen had morning sickness in the first months, but Robert took care of her with infinite patience. Brought tea, held her hair when she vomited, rubbed her swollen feet, talked to her belly every night, telling stories, singing off-key songs that made Helen laugh. Beatrice, when she found out, cried, asked to be the child's grandmother, even without blood ties. Helen and Robert accepted with joy. The birth happened on a January dawn, 8 months after the hasty wedding that had changed everything. It was hard, long, but in the end, when the baby's strong cry filled the house, everyone cried too. "It's a boy," announced the midwife. Robert held his son for the first time with trembling hands. The baby was small, red, perfect, looked into his father's eyes and stopped crying, as if recognizing him. "What shall we name him?" asked Helen, exhausted but happy in bed. Robert looked at her. "I thought of Thomas, if you agree, in honor of your first husband, and Cecily's bear." Helen felt her heart overflow. "I agree." And so Thomas Mercer came into the world, fruit of a marriage that started false but became truer than most planned ones. Beatrice visited a week later, held her foster grandson carefully, looked at him with love Helen didn't think the woman still had. "He looks like you, Robert," she said. "Has the shape of your face." Robert smiled. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me." 2 years passed. The ranch prospered. Robert had hired 2 more hands. The corn harvest yielded double. The cattle multiplied. The house was always full of a child's laughter. Thomas was a bright, happy boy who ran through the yard chasing chickens just like Cecily did. Robert had completely opened his half-sister's room. It became Helen's sewing room. But they kept the box with the letters and the bear on a high shelf, preserved with affection. Helen was pregnant again. This time, It was a girl. They were going to call her Claire Cecily. On a Sunday afternoon, they were all gathered at the ranch. Robert, Helen, Thomas, Beatrice, Josephine, Reverend August, who had come for lunch. The table was plentiful: chicken, rice, beans, cornbread, greens, milk candy. Robert raised his glass of wine. "I want to make a toast. 2 years ago I was desperate, alone, thinking I had lost everything. Then a courageous woman appeared who accepted a crazy proposal. We married without love, but we built love. And today I have a family again. I have peace. I have a future. Thank you, Helen, for saying yes that day." Helen raised her glass, full of water because she was pregnant. "Thank you for giving me a home when I didn't have one, for loving me when I thought I would never be loved again, for showing me that starting over is possible." They clinked glasses. Everyone drank. Thomas, not understanding but wanting to participate, raised his little cup of milk and shouted, "Cheers!" Everyone laughed. After lunch, Robert and Helen walked to Cecily's grave, which was in a corner of the pasture under a cottonwood tree. They had planted flowers around it. It was beautiful, cared for. Robert knelt, touched the headstone. "Hi, little daughter. Brought Helen and Thomas to visit you. Everything is good here. The ranch is growing. Your little brother is strong. And soon there will be a little sister too. We're going to tell them everything about you. Never gonna forget you. I promise." Helen knelt beside him, big belly touching the ground. "Thank you, Cecily," she whispered, "for taking care of your dad until I arrived. I'll take care of him now, and I'll love him for me and for you." They stayed there in silence under the warm afternoon sun, surrounded by land that was theirs, by love they built, by peace they conquered. The marriage had started with a lie, but ended with the most beautiful truth, that true love can be born in the most unlikely places, between the most broken people, and heal wounds that seemed eternal. Robert took Helen's hand. She squeezed back, and together they walked back home, to their life. To the happiness that almost didn't happen, but that was now more real than anything else. And somewhere, among the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky, 2 women named Claire and Cecily smiled, happy because the one they loved had finally found peace.